All right, welcome everybody to Booze Hour Live. This is a community edition episode today, and I'm going to welcome on our guest very soon, Diraj Goel. Before I do that, just a couple things I wanted to go over. If you're watching from YouTube right now, just below here, you should see a subscribe button. If it's red, then you should be hitting that. If it's gray, then thank you very much. If there's a bell beside there, you can click on the bell as well, and you'll be able to get notifications anytime we go live. And anytime I upload a new video, which is right now about 3 times a week. There's a Monday weekly show. Myself and Daryl jump on that. We provide weekly technical updates on F5. We usually have a guest that we bring on and have a little bit of banter with them as well. The other 2 things that I do every week, there's a Booze Hour Cloud Edition. That's another technical show. That one we drill in a little bit deeper and try to get a little bit further into topics. Now, this past week, we actually had Peter Scheffler on, who's a cybersecurity solution architect with F5. And we actually went over some topics, current topics with encryption. And I thought that was a really cool discussion. So if you want to check out, just look through the YouTube channel, and you should be able to find the replay for that. Otherwise, a couple other things. If you're watching this from Facebook right now, you can actually head over to the YouTube, which is youtube.com/DarylandBoo, and hit the subscribe button from there. I've also started an Instagram account, so just taking sound bites out of our shows and then putting them onto Instagram as well for folks to be able to consume bite-sized pieces of the content. I've also started up a website, just DarylandBoo.com, with the videos that we send out on Mondays. If you're on Daryl's list that he sends this out to, we also send the text of all the links that I talk through in the technical updates. And what we're doing is we're going to put those just onto a website, archive them on there. All the links to the videos will be on there as well, so you'll be able to find that. And one more thing that we have is this community edition podcast, which I'll talk through the idea of community edition in a second, but taking that, ripping down the audio just for this, and then putting that up in a podcast format. So you can go to Apple Podcasts, you can go to Podbean, and you can go to Google Play Podcasts, and you'll be able to download just the audio version from Community Edition there. Community Edition, just to remind everyone, this is just to kind of break up the content. So I put a lot of F5 content out there for you guys. Our weekly update has technical updates. Our Cloud Edition show has technical pieces as well around F5. The Community Edition is an add-on piece, not technical related. This is meant to be some sort of add-on that hopefully you can add to either the health or the wealth, or your family's well-being inside of your life. So previously, I've had on the owner of my gym that I go to, and we talked about health and fitness. I've had on a guy, 5 a.m. Joel, who found some financial freedom very early on in his life through careful investing and careful spending. I think I'll try to have on some more folks around the investment space as well, and personal finance space, and that might be of help to some folks. And I think, being in Vancouver, real estate's always a topic. So, and myself being a real estate investor on the side as well, that might be a cool topic for people to check out. So, the idea of this is not meant to be anything to do with any of the F5 updates. And that being said, Diraj, while he was one of my customers, an F5 customer, I'm going to bring him on in a second. Diraj has a really interesting background that we'll be able to dig into. And I think right now, the topics that we'll be able to cover with him are going to be really helpful just from a business perspective and looking at how your company is doing and what your company should be doing going forward. So with that, let me bring on Diraj. Diraj, how you doing, man?
Good. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Like I mentioned before, you've been a customer of F5 in the past.
Yeah.
Now you've moved on to really interesting venture. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I left the corporate world about 3 years ago and decided to go off on my own finally after years of climbing the corporate ladder, and I started a firm called Get Fresh Ventures. And we're a startup studio, or a foundry, and in some cases that's what it's called. But essentially, we work with companies that have defined a product market fit. However, they have challenges in scaling, and our team brings forward a team of ex very prominent C-level executives and we provide an outsourced C-level capability to help the company navigate all the challenges that they should anticipate as they scale and grow. Everything from talent, organizational design, financial planning, incentive planning, digital strategy, marketing, sales design, anything that you would anticipate that you would encounter as you scale towards $150 million company.
Mm. Yeah, really cool. So we'll be able to dig into that a lot more. What I wanted to do was kind of dig into Diraj as the person. You started off your career on the more on the technology side as opposed to business and technology. How did you get into technology in the first place?
Well, I grew up in Singapore, and my dad was a senior engineer at Texas Instruments. So this was before Texas Instruments was renowned for their calculators. They also created Apple IIe clones and the TI Speak and Spell. Which anyone who grew up in the 80s or the late 70s or 80s knows the Speak and Spell. It was one of the first prototypes of that unit. Actually, was what my dad brought home. So, from that very age, having an Apple IIe clone sitting there with Byte magazine, copying all the code on those back pages that came across multiple revisions to create a basic game. I guess after all that, it will almost be odd if I didn't go into tech.
Wow, that's really cool. I can't imagine like copying code out of a magazine as opposed to getting it electronically.
Yeah, so you couldn't buy games. There was no hard drive, so the only way you could run code on the computer was you had to type it and press go. There was no memory either. So if my brother and I spent, I don't know, every night not doing our homework and typing in code, my mom could just come and shut off the computer and put us in tears for several hours.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
really cool. So so I didn't know you grew up in Singapore. When did you actually come to Canada then?
In 1990.
Oh, wow.
Right. I started in grade 8.
Oh, wow. Cool. That's awesome. So did you go into technology when you went on to higher ed then?
Well, I went to university at SFU, first starting with computer science and math, which was two of my favorite subjects in high school. But I very quickly realized that I couldn't spend my time behind the computer all day. Even though I loved coding until late at night, what became a lot more interesting was what I was coding for, the delight I saw in how people reacted to the work that I created. I actually wanted to figure out how I could do that at a larger scale. So I went into psychology, I went into history, I audited a bunch of different subjects, and then ultimately decided to drop out of school and start a company. So I did 3 years, and I was almost at the point of graduation when I left university. But I did tech. And gave it a full shot, but I ended up doing a whole bunch of other things.
Okay. Well, so what was the company that you started?
I started a company called Covalent Systems. It was actually a company called Orbital before, which I realized that after that there was already an Orbital Systems. But first, I started a company just building computers, like actually putting them together and selling them by custom built for business. And then I moved into a managed services model where we just handle on a flat fee services based on the number of computers a business had. So like if you imagine, like the early 90s, no one knew how to fix a computer or do anything, and that was a good business.
Wow. So you discovered a pretty lucrative business model pretty early on. Then just now, people are starting to realize that they have to move into those recurring revenue type models, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just made complete sense. Most of the time, you know, once people get accustomed to it, they only will use you for the things that they need, not for every small little issue. And it's intrinsic in how we deliver the service. We try to anticipate the problems that the users would have, so we wouldn't have to make the call. And it was just a matter of fixing all the problems so they call you less, but charge the same. And eventually that made a lot more money than ad hoc service costs.
Wow, that's cool. So where did you end up from there then?
From there, well, no, this is going back a little bit to my past, but I actually started at a company called, so I was at Future Shop for a while too, prior to dropping out. So I had that tech experience, but I started a company called WebCT at that point, and that was after my, so Orbital was fixing computers. Then I had Covalent Systems, which is a services company. What I learned from putting all the computers into businesses was that now people didn't not only know how to fix the physical machine, they didn't actually know how to use all the systems that they were getting implemented in their organizations. And it wasn't even in terms of business process or anything. It was just, how do you configure this? How do you use it? And what happens when a problem occurs? So we provided that service for several years, and that was Covalent Systems. And then at that point, I decided that I was missing out on the corporate world, and I decided to jump into startups. And I started working at a company called WebCT, which was one of the first learning management platforms in the world, actually, by a university professor out of UBC. And that was my first foray into tech startups. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I'm not sure if you want to hear the whole story.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to dive into that. I think a lot of people in Vancouver have heard of WebCT and Blackboard, but might not know the story behind it.
Yeah, so it started off as viral software. It was given out to the university professors, and they installed it in their own systems. So it wasn't like a server-based solution. It was server on the university professor's computer, and we would then serve out his course. And the course will only be available as long as the computer was running. And eventually, as more and more professors started using the solution to augment their in-class education, the university started thinking about looking at LMS systems that they provided as a service to the professors, as opposed to the professors loading it on their own computers. And that's when it truly became a business. And WebCT, when I started, had just been bought up by a company out of Boston, Lynnville, Massachusetts, a company called Universal Learning Technologies, that then took over the WebCT name, and we started on a super high growth path. And I was there for about 6 years, where we matured from a flat file based PHP software to a enterprise level WebLogic on Oracle platform, where our license fees went from $3,000 to several $100,000 a year.
Wow. So that's, I mean, that's quite the rise and quite the experience that you would have got at a pretty early age then as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was still a kid. I started there as working in help desk, going under desk, pretty much what I was doing in my business, but at a more junior level. I had to learn everything running my business, so it was pretty easy for me to learn, figure out what I needed to do at the job as a help desk tech. But by the time 6 years came around, I was the head of technology and actually facilitated the merger and acquisition process in terms of merging the technology frameworks and processes and systems and everything. So and that's what startups do to you. There's a time dilation that happens in startups where 3 weeks feels like 3 months, 1 year feels like 5 years. You just get exposed to so much, and you have to fix everything all right now that you don't actually have enough time to immerse yourself in any one thing, but you get kind of good at a lot of different things.
Is there any key lessons that you got out of that experience then?
Well, I think the intrinsic, I mean, what I learned was how to scale myself, because inevitably, if you can't scale yourself, you can't scale anything else. And it was the first time I started to stop worrying about all the details, but worry about what really mattered. And what I figured is that you pretty much have to do everything that you're going to be responsible for, just so you can call bullshit on whether someone's telling you the truth or not. I think that's the biggest lesson I learned in scaling from within.
Yeah, that's cool. So how big was the team by the time you guys were done?
In terms of the entire company, or?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I can't even remember. I think it was probably about 150 to 200 people in the company.
Okay. Wow. And that was all just from one UBC professor that started everything.
Yes.
Yeah. That's it's a great success story in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So from there, where did your career take you?
Well, I have to remember again. Where did I leave to? I actually started working at a company called Sophos.
Okay.
So I was at Sophos for exactly a year, and I worked as the head of technical operations, so technology operations. And that's essentially designing the technology framework for how Sophos would work together globally, from the R&D perspective, in terms of, it's not IT necessarily, but it was user experience for and all the supporting infrastructure for the R&D teams across the globe. And R&D at Sophos has multiple facets. One is that you're developing software, but the other side is you're also doing R&D on all the viruses and malware that was out there. So you had to have progressive research as well as research and development in terms of development side of there was more research in their R&D than most companies, because most companies R&D is about 95% development and 5% research. So they had very unique challenges in integrating those companies, those functions into a unified user experience to increase the velocity of their development. They also acquired, the way they were in Vancouver, Sophos is a 30-year-old software company, probably actually longer than 30, 40-year-old now, because that was a long time ago that I was there. And they're $1 billion company, and they acquired a startup in Vancouver called Active State, which is where I started working in Sophos, Vancouver. So that was a very, very interesting situation, because you have this 30-year-old waterfall-based traditional technology, operationally sound company acquiring Active State, which was a fully agile, full startup, type company, and it was a very unique challenge in involving both companies on a unified platform. But there's a lot of stuff that you would learn from a security company that you just don't see anywhere else.
I bet, yeah, that's some cool experience. And then from there, did you go direct to Vision Critical? So Vision Critical is where we met for the first time.
Yeah. So actually, I probably skipped a few steps in terms of a few transitions in my career step. But from there, I went to a company that it was called Integrity Party Solutions. It was a security company. We sold F5 appliances as well. So I was quite familiar. I actually did F5 training. So what we did was we worked with companies on their entire security implementation. And back then, security was less process and more infrastructure, as well as bringing in the process in terms of compliance standards and so on. So I worked as a management consultant at this company after leaving Sophos for about a couple of years, and this was right during the Olympics as well. So some of the projects I worked on was with Vanoc in all the security, with YVR and all the security that they needed to implement to support the Olympics, as well as very, very unique security projects that came our way. Through that organization. They're part of Deloitte now. They got bought up by Deloitte a few years ago.
Right. Okay. And from there, you made it over to Vision Critical then?
Yes. And this opportunity came up to work with, I thought was a household name, Angus Reid. I thought it was actually, Angus Reid sounds like two different names. It could have been two different people, actually. Yeah, so I just knew that it was a household name and it was a prominent name, and it was in market research until I started to learn about Vision Critical and the opportunity to work at that level in terms of the unique nature of the space. Because having worked at WebCT and having been with technology from the very early day, and then seeing technology being used in a novel, however tried and true approach. Engaging people online is already tried and true, but the novel approach is applying it directly to market research for more rapid insights, and working with someone who has had that 30, 40-year-old history in market research. It was just such a great opportunity to start at the company. So I took a pay cut from my management consultant salary, and then decided to come on as the director of technology for the company. And at that point, I think we were about 60 employees. And 7 years later, when I left, we were, I think, over 1,100, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow. So when you're moving to these companies, you've hit a number of companies at this point that had exponential growth while you were there. Was that part of your selection for these companies that potential interested you?
Yes. I pursued these companies where, it was like going through the interview process was like, felt like going on a date with the belle of the ball, right? Could I actually get in? Would they really even think that I was competent enough to work there? And even though there were upstarts, you kind of knew that if you get some good people behind an idea and they're able to execute in a niche that no one is in yet, you have a high potential of being the number 1 to 5 player in that space, or get acquired by one. So with WebCT, we got acquired by Blackboard, we were number 1. They became number 1. Then as number 1, they bought us as number 2. And Blackboard may not be number 1 anymore today, but at a point in time they were. So having being able to understand what a company does before you take on a role is pretty critical if you want to navigate what you want to learn. And the industry that you choose is pretty important.
And from Vision Critical, you went to another company experiencing hypergrowth, Hootsuite, another great story in Vancouver as well.
Yes, yes. And yes, that transition happened a little bit quicker than I would have liked. I was at that point, when I left Vision Critical, I was at the point where I had decided, I wasn't going to go back to the corporate world, and I was going to start my own company. So I actually started developing an ML based uh, technology to refine corporate information, so that
Mm.
individuals in an organization could get the signal from the noise of what they really mattered. What I realized in working at Vision Critical for so many years was that the streams of information were only going to, the number of streams of information were only going to increase, and the volume in each stream was also going to increase, to the point where we will just get a fire hose of information. And like, if you guys use Slack, you know that that's a fire hose of information, because anyone who wants to talk to you can talk to you.
Yeah.
And anyone who wants to talk to a group can talk to the group. So I was building a solution to address that. But then Hootsuite came with an offer, and it checked all the boxes. And it made it a really difficult decision to go back. But I decided that it was a great opportunity. Hootsuite, it's got cachet to its name. It's got a good brand. It was a pioneer in social media. And it seemed like the best decision at the time.
Yeah. And you were there at a time where it was growing quite rapidly as well, right? You were probably helpful in that endeavor.
Yeah. So my role was, the company had not hired a head of operations before, and it became evident to all the executives that that was a sorely needed role. But a company that grows organically without an operational framework kind of is in a more challenged state to get operationally sound, unless everyone's bought in. And I think the challenge in that role when I started was understanding what the role was, and ultimately they now have an operational leadership. They have understood how to delegate roles and design roles in a way that made a business engine meaningful. So that the company's in a better situation. The challenge I had when I was there, which you learn a lot in a company that is Vancouver born, right, in terms of the type of leadership that was there, as well as the kind of thinking that went into building that company, plus also the unique insights in social media and all the possibilities of the platform as an aggregation point. So everything from YouTube to I'm assuming they're on to TikTok now, but you learn a lot about the dynamics of consumer behavior based on the social energy, right? Like, what's the discourse and how does that impact from a customer intelligence standpoint, how people make decisions, whether you're a B2B consumer and you're head of technology buying software that's $1 million a year, or you're the same person deciding to buy one phone over the other, or one pain cream over the other, right? So I think the experience that I had from Vision Critical and Hootsuite were together so closely was quite beneficial in understanding human dynamic from a customer intelligence standpoint, and it's been helpful in the regard of helping me with what I'm doing now, with helping companies grow.
So that kind of brings us to where you are today. So it sounds like you have the culmination of all of these years of, it seems like you've hit like hypergrowth after hypergrowth after hypergrowth, and you have all this experience, and you were able to bring this into the company that you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, we're always the sum of all our parts, right? And I think Jobs said it best that you can't connect the dots forward. You're always going to go back and look at how your journey got you to where you are today. And I think for what's important for me today is knowing how to build a company that can scale both on the desires of the people in the company, as well as the ability for those individuals to work effectively and efficiently with the systems and processes and technologies that support them. Working in high growth companies, being responsible for technology, operations, systems, just the innate human sentiment, meaning that if you run IT and the user base isn't happy with technology, you're kind of not doing a good job. However, when the technology itself is terrible, what do you do? In that whole process of learning what it took to scale a company and what kind of problems you run into, and what makes a company more evergreen in its ability to stay on its path, has helped me put together a framework that I actually, it was one of the first things I did after leaving Hootsuite, which I kind of stumbled into, which was working with Bill Tam, who was CEO of BC Tech at the time, and his team, who's a great team, by the way, in building out the Hypergrowth Accelerator. So that's a 6-month program where I show ran two cohorts, and all those companies that came through the cohorts, except for a couple, but that had their reasons for turning around. But all those companies are on a high growth path. They're funded, and somewhere in the top 10 of Vancouver right now, right? Wow. So it's good to see that the companies that you supported through a framework that you built get to that point of success, and that's really what led to Get Fresh Ventures, which is the manifestation of everything that I've done, and then taking that as a tip of the spear to purpose-driven companies that we feel are doing something that's meaningful. So if we have a capability as a company to help companies scale, then it's imperative that we scale the companies that are meaningful to what we value. So things that improve, that are better for the greater good for us, good for consumers, good for the company, good for shareholders. Those companies do exist, and we intend to work with them.
That's really cool. So what is the typical state of a company that comes to Get Fresh?
Sorry, what's the typical?
What's the typical state of a company that comes to Get Fresh looking to work with you?
So inevitably, when you start something new, and any founder who's experimenting in a belief that something exists, is you're going to have to get more data and inputs. And frankly, right now, we've been fine-tuning what our criteria is and how to refine what are the companies that we actually look at. So in that process of trying to refine and figure out who that company is, in where that sweet spot lies, we've worked with companies at multiple stages. Just because with the experience I've had, I understand various different stages. So even if you're at the ideation point, and you're actually just mapping out what the business is going to look like, we've worked in that capacity, where we've taken something from ideation to live within a 3-month period, and then fully in selling. So one of the companies, for example, that we worked with, and this was to test the model, which was a vegan leather brand. So it was a couture, affordable vegan leather brand by a designer out of Japan, who came to us and said she wants to launch this brand. I mean, normally I wouldn't go down the path of launching an apparel brand where I have no idea how to position a product or understand the economics of it, but we helped her build the economic model. We designed her entire profitability model, her business model, her growth model, her marketing strategy. We built out her website, and we launched all her social channels, where within 60 days, within breaking ground or first signing the contract to launch was 60 days.
Wow.
And 2 months later, she was selling a bag a day. So it's and this is with the team that we also developed over that period. So there's natural evolution in a team, but with the process, even with a new team, you can take the concepts that you are not fully versed in, and as long as you've got the right components, you can take it to market. I mean, we took that company to market with all the development, all the photography, the visuals, and so on. We took it to market for under $25,000.
Wow.
That's with full services, right? So you can do it efficiently. We know how to do it, and that's a very different instance to another company that's a SaaS company that was doing over $1.5 million in revenue already. Actually, it was more a services trying to be a SaaS company, and I think at the time I had 12 employees, and we worked with them over a 3-month period and transformed them into a pure SaaS play, on a path to a pure SaaS play, and help them restructure the executive team to then building sustainable models for financial and growth planning, as well as execution. So the CEO is a good friend. That's a company called Social Nature, and the CEO is a good friend. And when you work with someone who needed help and support, and then 2 years later you see them, like, frankly, running the show with all the confidence that you want to see in a founder, as well as the empathy and the focus. You see that with her, and she just completed her raise. Actually, but several months ago, 8 months ago. So, we work with a full range of companies, and ultimately, I think we will find our sweet spot in the next couple of years. But through that journey, my expectation is that we're going to be working with a few different types of situations for founders, and helping them scale and grow.
Well, so by the time, I mean, it sounds like there's a whole range of people that would end up in your hands there. Do you ever find that it is maybe some of the leadership are having disagreements, and they are looking to external parties to kind of help them move forward? Are they in situations where they're just tired of being not profitable, and they need to find solutions, and they go to someone like yourself?
Yeah, so generally it is a situation where a founder has run a company to the best of their ability or creativity. It just inherently, if you're always operating something, you start to get a more myopic view. Sometimes the problem you're in is only the problem that you can see, because you don't have the time to see the solutions. So if a founder is stuck but has a viable business model, then we can definitely help them. Because if there is a market demand for whatever that they're selling, there's some prominence in their ability to actually deliver that what they're selling. But then their challenge is actually communicating to that market, having the infrastructure to then deliver whatever they're selling it with consistency, which inherently requires process, standard operating procedures, all those elements that you have for repeatable growth. Then we help them, because we bring a whole set of skills that most founders don't even know they have access to, and we know how to implement it very, very rapidly.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess you've worked with organizations that have had to really turn around their business model. really quickly. It sounds
Yeah.
like the services to SaaS company is a good example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think once the numbers don't lie unless you get the wrong numbers. But if you take an assumption and you play the math out, and eventually you have to make more assumptions, and you make more assumptions, and you make more assumptions, and you keep doing that math, and pretty soon you have a business model, a financial business model, and then you can throw any scenario on that. And once you throw all the scenarios that you think are going to happen, and if that scenario doesn't look profitable or beneficial, I think it's time to rethink what you're doing. So we usually just start there. And the turnaround doesn't happen because we say you need to turn around your business. The turnaround happens because we show the numbers of every decision you're going to make, and then let the numbers say, okay, I think we got to rethink what we're talking about here. And that's usually how we resolve conflict that can occur if companies are stuck at the point of a conflict at a leadership or an executive level, or we just help them see things that they can't see. And they're good operators, but they need strategic support.
Yeah, interesting. And I think right now too, like people are realizing that if they weren't digitally transformed before, they need to now, because they're realizing that their business doesn't, if it's brick and mortar, it doesn't really hold a whole lot of water when people can't visit your business. Are you guys getting approached these days?
Yes. I think part of it is also us telling our story in terms of where we help companies and how we can help them get through various situations. Ultimately, what we've all learned here right now is that you can't just consider your business and look for opportunities to be recession proof. You actually also have to consider situations or business models that are pandemic proof. Meaning that you do have an alternate business model so that you can survive a cash flow crunch in the form of a pandemic. And the reality is the only way to do that is online. And if you look at a company like Lululemon, they're posting holiday numbers during this pandemic, so much so that just their online is usurping all their retail numbers. Combined, including their stores, which then kind of begs the question: why the hell do they need stores, right? But everyone's also wearing more Lululemon, I'm assuming, because they're home and they're not going out. But there are many factors to that jump. But what you immediately realize is that you need to be online, and if you are not, then you're already behind, and you should look for a very rapid solution to fix that problem.
What do you think so let's actually, maybe for Lululemon as an example, they just announced that they're reopening their stores in the last day or so. I just saw that. What do you think the next 6 months till the end of the year looks like for someone like a Lululemon?
Well, I think Lululemon will always stay strong, primarily because people don't just shop there for product, but they shop there as a lifestyle. It's like it's a lifestyle brand where regardless of what happens, you're still going to get your Lululemon. And they've got enough of a start in new markets that even with weakened demand overall, they're still in an emerging space where that weakened demand won't matter, because they pretty much will sell out everything they make. Because they've only tapped into a fraction of that demand so far. So companies like Lululemon, who are already online, they've got a digital platform. They decided at one point to be a digitally native or start to move into that space. I think whoever made that decision at the executive level, the company at that time, should be rewarded, because they're doing better than some of the more entrenched retailers who don't actually have a solid online presence.
Mm. Do you see, going forward, some cohesion between brick and mortar and digital?
Yeah, I think, and that's where that's the whole paradigm of digital transformation. I mean, what the hell is digital transformation? You just throw that word around. You need to be digitally transformed, but what does that mean? That means that every single touch point that a person has with a brand can be digitally sized up, measured, evaluated, reviewed, and insights drawn from it, so you can improve that digital experience. That touch point.
Mhm.
If you can't digitally measure it, you don't know what the hell's going on there, and that could be the greatest point of your conversion. Drop in your conversion rate from someone being aware of your brand to buying from you, or coming back and rebuying from you. So digitally transform means you should already be trying to do that, even if you weren't going online. Now, going online is going to be the catalyst to get you to get a deeper understanding of your customer, but ultimately, that's the investment that you need to make. That is the biggest investment for a company to survive. Who can outdo, which brand can outdo the other in the most cost-effective, profitable way is the one that's going to win, and the one that's digitally savvy and knows where the customers are having challenges in getting to their product or service, and able to rapidly improve that situation. That company is going to win.
Mm. What do you think the keys are to digital transformation? Do you think the keys are in the e-commerce, the marketing, the digital engagement with customers online?
Where are the keys?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everything you just said right now are not, from a customer vantage point, different things. To them, it's all the same, right?
Mm.
Like, you as one customer to a brand, you don't care what department put together that specific touch point. To you, it's all just one. I'm talking to Apple, right?
Mm.
Like, and if you think of the complexity of touch points that Apple has, from their operating system to their phones to their iCloud to this and that and everything, and all these various ways you can interact with that brand when you have a problem across all the facets of their business, and you still have one unified perspective.
Mm.
You don't feel like this one part of Apple doesn't know this other part of Apple, and you get into a loop, because Apple constantly tests that from a customer vantage point. They constantly test it.
Mm.
How can they be a customer of their own system and then understand what a consumer is dealing with? That's an investment. That's a heavy investment to make. But I mean, if you make the investment, then you could be the richest company in the world, right? So I think that's the utopia. Anywhere from where companies are today to that utopia is what they should pursue.
Mm. Well, yeah, that's probably like a mind blown statement that you gave there on how to put those pieces together. What do you think some pitfalls are going to be for some of the brick and mortar out there if they're not going to digitally refactor themselves? What do you think the first ones that are going to fall are going to be? Just general
I think
retail?
it's unfortunate to think that anyone's going to fail, because I don't think there's any situation where it will fail or it should fail. Like, it's interesting that Amazon started and then put all the bookstores out of business, the brick and mortars, bookstores, and now they're opening up their own bookstores.
Mhm.
Amazon bookstores, physical bookstores. Why is Amazon selling books out of a store when that's the business that people that they eliminated? And the reality is that people still like to touch stuff. They like to see stuff. They like to browse stuff. They want to actually leave their homes. They don't want to shop for a book without smelling a book sometimes, even if they read on a Kindle all day. There's a certain amount of nostalgia or community or presence that's relevant. So if you're not digitally, you're not on the path of going digital, or you don't know how to go to digital, you would talk to a company like ours. And the first thing we would say to you is partner with a digital company. Look at a digital company and a physical company merger. Shared values. There's a lot of digital companies coming up. Take the path to digital by acquisition or merger, and be a better company with both values intertwined. Now you've got presence, which are beachheads in critical communities and cities, and digital for the after purchase, like Lululemons. Lululemons have beachhead stores, and they have online. So someone goes to the store, tries on an outfit, feels great about it, touches everything, feels even better about it, goes home and buys the different color in the pants that they bought.
Yeah, I can say I've done the exact same thing. I've gone to the store, finally find a pair of Lululemon pants that I like, bring it home, bought 3 more colors of the same thing. But I wouldn't have got those pants if I hadn't actually stepped into the store to try them on and get the idea of it. Because I looked at them online, found what I thought was the fit that I would go for, and I ended up going for a different fit. But
that's the biggest worry, isn't it? Right? Like that's why shoes have a 45% return rate. Because we like to touch stuff and see stuff and stand in front of the mirror and and smell stuff and feel stuff. It's hard to take that away. That you can't automate everything to be digital. You take lessons from companies that are doing this well, right? Like Apple, Lululemon, Indochino. Think about that business model. You got to measure people. I remember my first Indochino order. You actually signed up and they sent you a measuring tape and then taught you how to measure, how to get yourself measured. You put all the measurements into the system, and 6 weeks later you get a suit. It didn't fit right. There was a lot of pain points, but Drew Green, who's the CEO now, has really transformed that company, and it's digitally sound. It's a brick and mortar company. They're opening more stores. Their customer acquisition cost is actually on par to some online only brands. And they also have higher than expected lifetime value. And by that, I mean people coming back and buying more suits, right? Like, if you think about the suits you've bought in your life, if you've never bought from Indochino, presuming you haven't bought the suits from the same place over and over again.
No, right? You don't really think of a suit. Well, there's a couple of spots, but unless you're going to Holt Renfrew all the time, you probably don't have a personal shopper that knows your measurements.
Right. So there is a market, right? Like the regular Joes, not the stockbrokers, who get $2,000 suits and has a personal shopper. So they figured out that model. And now they've got the physical element, which guarantees the high quality suit. They've got the online element that allows you to buy another suit that matches that same style that you got the first time.
Yeah, that's cool. So we got about 5 minutes left here. I thought maybe we can close off with, if you're an organization right now, you're rethinking what you need to be doing, at a high level, what are the things that you need to be looking out for, not just wishing and hoping that everything is going to be okay, but there's going to be changes going forward, and how is a business going to navigate the next or till the end of the year here with the situation that we're in?
Well, there's a few things. There's always that hard decision that you're going to make, that this is just not going to work. And I think that has to be a clear acceptance of that. The sooner you accept it, the less money you're going to lose, even with all the government loans and such. Like, just do the math. and make certain assumptions. Just do the math. Like it's, if you need some help with the math, maybe I'll have my team put together some templates on how you can do that math. Actually, that's probably something that we will do. So that's actually a great idea. So I'll take that away. But do the math to figure out whether you're going to have the ability to pay it all back. Any debt you take on, because you're going to have to pay it back. And if you can't, then shut it down. Just stop, because you're going to end up losing more money. But if you did the math and things look good, or if they don't look grim, meaning that maybe the numbers still don't work out, but they're not grim, then now you can actually revisit what you're going to do, because now you at least know where the weak points are in your business model. Is it not enough customers? Is it too low prices? Is it not the ability to sell? Like what is it? Like how can you overcome that problem? And think of it from the vantage of the consumer, whoever your consumer is, right? If you're selling software for marketing automation, when people are not spending money on marketing, it might be a challenge, right? So if you don't have pre-existing recurring revenue, then you should be a little bit worried that you're not going to be able to close those sales immediately. But it really depends on the business. But do the math. Because if you were planning before, just put the grim numbers on the table and then see how much cash flow you need, and then see whether you will be able to pay it back. And if you can't pay it back, then you got to make that decision to exit.
Yeah, I feel like there's, not even just COVID related, but I can imagine that there's probably some founders that come to you that probably are afraid to look at their own math and not willing to accept some of the numbers that, that is revealing the truth of their business.
Yeah, I mean, it's a founder trait. I don't want to be derogatory of the that perspective. It's the founder's belief that they can bend reality. The numbers gives you the confined view of or certain physical structure of the universe. But you know what? As founders, we can bend nature, we can bend physics, and we can make the impossible happen. You kind of have to be crazy to be a founder. So, that bleeds into your assumption that the numbers kind of don't matter, but they do. Because that's how you're going to be judged the moment you get on an investor, right? So, and that's an external investor getting very interested in your numbers. You're your first investor. Why aren't you worried about your numbers?
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we've hit the hour here, Diraj. So it'd be great actually to have you on again, probably like in a few months from now.
Sure.
And we take a look at, how things have gone over time. And you probably have some war stories that you'll be able to share with us. The next few months here. So that'd be great. Really appreciate you coming on. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, you're on all the socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, everything, right?
Yeah, and I know how to handle multiple channels. It might be late, but you will get a response.
Yeah, cool. Otherwise, visit Get Fresh. You guys have had multiple success stories through there. So if anybody's looking for that boost in their company, great place to seek that out and seek out the professionals that can take you to that next stage, just like Diraj has done over the past 20 years. So great to have you on. Thank you very much, Diraj. For everybody who hasn't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button below and you'll see more of this content week by week. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.